Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar about the AI native CFO. Today we're going to talk about how we go from a fragmented finance to autonomous decisioning in the finance organization. My name is Aurélien Caye, and I'm a principal solution architect here at Unify. Today we are first going to cover what are some of the key challenges that the finance teams are facing when it comes to scaling AI. Then we're going to touch on how can Unify apps help with an AI operating systems, financial leaders automate their processes. And we're going to touch on some of the use cases that have already been deployed live for CFOs. And we will actually spend some time in the platform to see some of those use cases. The first one will be about invoice reconciliation. Then we'll touch on account receivable collection, so the other side of the picture. And for the last one, we're going to move away from a use case that is optimizing an existing process of the finance team to seeing how can the finance team cost control and optimize the different agents and the different AI applications that are existing within the organization. During this webinar, feel free to ask your questions in the chat. We have some team members available to provide you with some answers. First, as you may know, most companies today are trying to bring AI within their processes, see how they can become more efficient, drive more revenue, reduce their costs, manage their risk, using AI to transform their existing process. But what we are seeing, and this is coming from an MIT study from a few months ago, is that 95% of all of generative AI projects are actually failing to deliver results. They stay in pilots versus going into production. Why is that happening? First, and specifically in the context of finance, data is fragmented. You have data that's coming from your ERP, from your CRM, from your bank feeds, from your procurement tools, etc. And so there is no one connecting place where all of this data can be available and made sense of by an AI agent. So it doesn't have that full picture to give the right answers and to help with your processes. The second issue, and this is related, is that because you have so many different systems in your organization, it means that there is a lot of manual workflows that are still done by hand manually by your different teams, whether that's for invoices, for reconciliation, for collections. And so eventually, the agent is not able to take actions across all of those different systems because they are so disconnected. And sometimes you might actually have an agent that is dedicated for one system, right? So an agent in your CRM, or maybe an agent that is built only for your invoices or for your collection. But those are standalone and you have to rebuild them every time. You have to create all of the integrations, the governance, and it's not scalable. And then the last thing is you might think, okay, that's all sounds good, but do I actually want to give access to data and systems to my agents? Because the third problem is the lack of governance. And specifically when you're talking about finance and some of this sensitive data, you want to make sure that everything that is happening from an agent standpoint is auditable, right? That you can put some controls and some policies in place. Because today, since this data is fragmented and those agents are siloed, it's impossible to actually trust and audit all of the actions that are done by AI agents. So this is what we're going to talk about today. How can we solve for this? To solve for this, we basically need to unify all of the context at the enterprise layer. First, we need to unify the data context, bringing your data from your structured knowledge, right, from your structured databases, from your internal knowledge into one place with some ontology and some context so that the agent can actually have the entire picture of what's happening to your financial data across the entire ecosystem. The second thing is when you connect to those actions, you want to actually avoid having siloed agents that kind of hold the key to actions and to process, but you want to actually be able to provide a pool of actions that are decoupled from the team or from the agents, and that can go and take some decisions, get some information from those different systems, right? So enabling that actionability context so that the agent knows what to do and where, depending on what it is supposed to do. And then last but not least, making sure that you set up some governance, again, decoupled from each individual processes, but at the enterprise level, defining what are your principles, your policies, the controls that you have in place, and keeping obviously the observability in place to make sure that the agents, no matter what you create, are going to follow this governance context, right? So those are the three contexts that you want to have in place first. Having data context so that the agent knows what it's talking about, action context so that the agent knows what it can do, and then governance context to know what it should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And so based on this, that is when you can actually start to build scalable applications and agents that are leveraging AI to optimize all of your finance workflows, obviously, while keeping a human in the loop when this is being required. So how do we do that at Unify Apps? The first thing is we have an integration layer. It's today comprised of more than 900 connectors, which connects to all of your system of records. So we talked about the ERP, the CRM, some of your banking feeds, your invoice systems, your reconciliation systems, etc. But also is able to connect to your knowledge, right? So think of your SharePoints, your drives, your S3 bucket, all of this institutional knowledge that is available about your processes and your roles in your organization. And then at last, it needs to be able to connect to what is happening in your organization, your system of activities, right? So your collaboration tools, your teams, your emails, and things like this. And so when it connects to all of this, it's not enough, right? Because you're bringing data from different systems. And so you might have some conflicting data, different formatting, data overlap, and things like this. And so you want to make sure that to create that data context that is actually usable, that context knowledge graph, you want to actually be able to ingest the data, but also run some quality rules, create the data cataloging, create all of the ontology and the metadata management to have this data context. And so this is really the foundation, connecting to all of your different systems and making sure that the data is in a good place. Once this is done, then you can start building your different workflows, your application, and your agents. You can think of workflows as RPA tools, automation tools that help you to orchestrate actions across all of the different systems. Your applications are going to be your human in the loop type of approach. This is where you're going to be able to see all of the data coming from the different places. This is where you're going to be able to trigger the workflows and to interact with the agents, having this human in the loop approach. And then the agent itself is going to be builders from simple agents that can be created by the business user, by a financial analyst that doesn't have a very deep technical acumen, all the way to more advanced multi-team, multi-agent team orchestration, which typically might be more handled by the IT organization or by some like advanced stakeholders within the finance organization. And so all of those different builders, all those different concepts, this is all within built within a no-code, low-code platform, which again makes it easy for business stakeholders to go and scale the development of their AI use cases and application, with the ability as well to prompt to create those UI and those experiences, again, making it faster to develop your use cases. And obviously, you might think something is missing here, which is the governance side of things, right? So this is the last piece of context that needs to be there to make sure that you're doing all of this not only in a scalable way, but also in a secure way. And so this is where creating, as I was mentioning before, your access control, your evaluation rules, your guardrails, your policy at the platform level that can then be inherited to all of the different components of the platform, whether that's going to be data access, workflows, what data is visible in the application, who can do what, and what is the agent able to do. That can all be governed in a central place with having this visibility of what's happening to the data, to your system, because it's all into one single platform. And so when this is built, then it can act in your different systems, take some actions, make some recommendations for your finance operation. And all of this while being agnostic of the LLM and of the deployment. Being agnostic of the LLM is going to help you avoid being stuck with a single AI vendor, but also give you the option to optimize your cost and your performance across the different LLMs based on the specialty and cost of each of them. The deployment standpoint, it's important because it gives you obviously the option to deploy within a SaaS environment or within your own private cloud or on-premise, where you can have more control over both your cost, but also your data security, which you might not want to leave your ecosystem, specifically when we're talking about sensitive financial data. With this platform, we've already deployed hundreds of agents that are currently delivering value for our customers across multiple industries. Out of all of those use cases that our customers have built, we've actually documented 280 plus use cases that are repeatable across all of our customers. Out of those, there is a very important subset that is dedicated to finance use cases. You can see here a few examples with some cost intelligence, approval manager for expenses, for budgets, and then some timesheet compliance orchestration. Those are just a few examples from the strategic planning and forecasting side of this use case library. And you can see for each of the use case, you have a description of the use case, as well as which customer in which industry is using this, and what is the ROI that they actually delivered by implementing those agents within their finance organization. And we didn't stop at this kind of generic side of things. We actually created more than 30 specific use case catalogs for each industry, right? So you will have finance use cases that are dedicated and more tailored to each of the verticals that you're working in. All right. We're now going to move into the demo so you can see some of these use cases in action. The first use case, as I was mentioning in the beginning, is invoice reconciliation. Here, beyond just showing you the use case, what we're going to touch on is an example of how multiple agents can be working together to analyze some documents, make some recommendation, and eventually take a decision on the approval or not of an invoice. Right? So you're going to see this type of orchestration with managing agents and multiple worker agents. For the second use case, we'll still have different agents working together, but this time we're going to see a richer interface which can cater to different types of persona, from the account receivable analyst all the way to the CFO, but also trying to understand how an agent, beyond just giving you a recommendation of making decision, can actually take some action and help you generate some time save and going in this use case to collect cash directly from customers. Again, leveraging integrations to multiple different systems, right? So it's going to be a slightly more complex use case that we're going to see in this one. And then at last, as I was mentioning as well in the beginning, we're going to move away from those traditional finance activities that can be transformed by AI into how can a finance team actually control and overview what's happening with their AI agents. And so we're going to see the control tower, which is a place where you can register all of the different agents that are within your organization, whether they are built in Unify apps or not, trying to understand what those agents are doing, but most importantly, how much do they cost to your organization? Is there some anomalies? Can you define some rules to avoid an agent going and spending too many LLM tokens, for example, right? Having this understanding of what is the ROI of the different agents that you've deployed, so you can have take the right decision in terms of which model you want to use, which agent is going to bring you the most value, etc., etc. Okay, let's start with the first use case. In this first use case, we're going to talk about invoice reconciliation. Here, typically, this is a process that is handled by a few different teams. You might have someone that's going to take the invoice, that might be in multiple different formats, then input that into the system. Then it's going to go to the finance team to review the calculation, make sure everything is correct, that the tax is done properly. And then you'll have maybe somebody from the legal side of things, checking the compliance, making sure it's part of the vendor list, it follows our compliance guidelines, etc. And eventually you'll have someone that makes a decision, okay, we want to go, let's approve this. That process, unfortunately, because there is a lot of different people involved, can take several days, sometimes several weeks. And so this is where we can automate that by mirroring this process with a team of agents that's going to be specialized in those same steps. The first one will be analyzing the document, the second one, the finance, the third one, the compliance, and then the last one, making a decision. And we see that we can keep a human in the loop for some of those most complex decisions. So let's go into the platform and see how that works in real time. As I'm showing you those different examples, keep in mind that those are just examples of user experience, of application that are being created all within the Unify Apps no-code builder. So everything is completely customizable in a very easy manner. You can actually prompt and ask an AI to go and make some changes in this screen to make sure that it matches your actual processes, your branding, and all of those different things. What we're looking at here is an application that has been created for this invoice team, and that is going to ingest all of the different invoices that are coming to the organization, can be coming from the ERP system, or for example, from scanning an email and ingested any invoice that has been sent. Once the invoices are ingested, you can see that they are being reviewed by the team of agents. So here, let's open one of them. All of this interface is a place for the human in the loop to see what's happening with AI, right? Having this level of transparency. You can see on the right side the actual invoice, right? So you can actually compare what the agent did versus what's coming in the invoice. On the left side, you'll be able to see what actions have been taken by the different agents. And you can see here there is one tab per agent, so we can very easily understand what's happening in this situation. The first agent is specialized in parsing the information from that document, because obviously every invoice is going to have a different format, and you don't want to go and build a template for each of them. That takes a lot of time and it's not scalable. So you want to have an AI agent who is able to actually read and understand the context of what's within any document. Here it's going to parse this information, and then it's going to actually go into the different databases, again, leveraging this integration to all of your different systems to understand, okay, what is the purchase order that is connected to that specific invoice? What is the receipt note that is connected to that specific invoice? And then comparing if all of the information match. Obviously, here we are in an example scenario where there is just 2 documents to review, but we have some customers that have much more complex matching processes with more documents and more things to review. Once this is all checked in, it goes to a second agent that's going to do the finance validation. Here it's going to make sure that the quantity is correct, the calculation of the quantity is good, that there is no problem from like the financial calculation, and that we're looking at the right tax brackets and all of this. It's going to give you some green flag, red flag. Obviously here, those checks are red, which is probably not the best color here, but it's basically telling me like, hey, everything works perfectly. There is no problem with this specific invoice. And then it goes to the third agent, which this one is focused more on the legal and compliance side of things. So it's going to check, is it part of the approved vendor database? And as you can see, I can actually go and understand what is the source of each of those decisions. So I can look at which document it's used to define what are ESG guidelines, the tax guidelines, etc. So I have this context, it's not a black box. And so eventually it goes to a decision maker, right? That's reviewing all of the red flag and green flag from the analysis agents and giving me a recommendation to approve or reject that specific invoice. Here, this one has been approved, but let's look at an example of an invoice that actually had some issues. So you can look at this one, slightly different format, and you see that already from the matching, there is a problem with the quantity where our purchase order versus the invoice and the receipt has actually gotten an issue, right? It's 14 versus 15, so there is one unit that was not delivered and invoiced. So in that scenario, obviously there is some red flags when it comes to the quantity matching, and then the decision is going to be, okay, let's make sure we can maybe do a partial payment for those 14 units, but let's go and understand what's happening to that last unit that we had in the initial purchase order. And then you can see here, we have this human in the loop approval rejection option. One thing that's obviously interesting is because we are talking about agents, beyond what is exposed into this UI, I can actually go and understand what is happening and what is the reasoning behind these agents to actually give that specific decision. Right? So if I just scroll back up, that's been a long conversation here, you can see what each of the agent has been doing. So you can see the document analysis did a few different steps, then it went to up the financial analysis that did a few other steps. So you can see all of this thought processing here, have some details, but also I can interact with this agent to ask deeper questions. So understanding what is the source of the PO for this invoice, or I can ask it to explain me the tax rate. And again, the team of agents is going to work together, giving me the source of the information that it has, so that I can make a decision to understand, okay, do we approve the agent decision or not? So that was the first use case. Obviously, you can then gather all of the data coming from it to see at the CFO level, okay, what is being processed, what is the ROI of these agents, how do we save some time in this entire process? Let's now move on to the other side of the picture, where we're actually sending invoice and trying to collect the cash from our customers. Here we're looking at a second use case. Again, you can see the user experience is very different, but it's still completely customizable. In this specific scenario, we're looking at a team of account receivable collection that is logging in the Monday morning, looking at all of the invoices that are past due, all of the cash that's basically out there that needs to be collected, and trying to understand, okay, what can we do without spending hours in spreadsheets, into different systems to understand which one should we contact first. And so here we have AI agents that are actually analyzing every few minutes, every few hours, all of the invoices that have been sent out from the different systems, looking at SAP, Salesforce, the banking feed, and then trying to start taking some actions automatically. So you can see here for each of the different accounts, you might have some different actions that are taken by the agents. So here, when I log in on Monday, I can see, okay, for this first account, the overdue is quite high, right? So at this point, it makes sense. The agent didn't decide to send a reminder. It actually escalated to the account manager because just sending an email wouldn't really make sense for that account specifically. For the next one, it's slightly longer, but still not enough. So at this point, it decided to send a payment reminder that's been personalized, right, with some additional context. For this one, for example, it's been only less than 2 weeks. So it just sent an automated reminder, no need to go into further details. And based on the history of this customer in the different systems, we know that we're expecting 5 days to get the payments. So there is a few different actions that can be taken. This one, for example, a reminder was sent, the payment was received, so it was entirely closed without a human having to interact in that specific process. Obviously, I'll touch on what are those rules that you can define for when the agent should be interacting versus not. But if you want to have some of those invoices collected automatically, that's something that's definitely an option. Let's actually look one that has a slightly more complex use case and see what happens here. So if you look at Vantage Capital Group, this specific account, you can see there is more than $70,000 that are out there, and it's starting to be quite overdue. In this case, the AI is actually recommended to offer a specific payment plan for that customer. But it requires a human approval because of the amount of that payment plan. So let's actually see what happens. When I log in, I can see, okay, the agent has already analyzed specific accounts. It knows that based on historical data, it's usually provides some quite late payments by a few days. And looking at the current credit score and some of the risk, it basically already made an analysis that the confidence score of recovering the cash is going to be higher with the payment plan than without it. So you can see actually the recommended payment plan, and the agent actually already drafted an email to send to the accounts, which then the AR analyst can just modify if they want to make some changes, or approve and send if they're happy with it. If I want, before I go and approve, I can go and view the details of that specific account. So I can see what's happening here. So we've already seen what's the outstanding cash out there, some of the lifetime value of the customer, the history coming again from all of those different sources and systems into one place. And I can also see what has the agent been doing, what is this activity log for this specific customer, what is the conversation history, as well as what is the risk for these customers, both coming from the systems that are integrated to, but also doing some online research autonomously to flag if there is any risk within this specific industry from a macro trend standpoint. So it gives, again, extra context to the AR analyst before they go and try to recover the cash. Now, when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're able to view what is done by the AI, specifically when you have some automated actions that are taken. And so this is why having a very detailed audit trail that shows who did what, for which account, which action, was that an AI agent, was that a human, what's at the system, and be able to very easily export all of this so that all of your operations can be audited in a safe way. Now, obviously, when you're taking some of these automated actions, you might want to put some controls in place to decide what is going to be my thresholds to automatically send a reminder or to automatically escalate, or when do we want a human in the loop versus when can the agent take some autonomous actions. You can define which AI is powering this and what is your confidence threshold that you're agreeing with to take some decisions, right? So here, instead of 80, you might want to push that to 1995 and just have more human in the loop if you want to be more safe. In the end, you also want to have an overview as a CFO of what is happening to my AR collections, how are things improving with the agents, which are my customers that are the most at risk, and then understanding what is the ROI of this agent, what is happening, how many things were automatically resolved without any human, how much cash was recovered through the AI agents, but also when we need to escalate with a human, how much time do we save from this manual collection team, which can then be focused on doing other tasks as well. All right, so that was 2 use cases of processes that exist within your finance ecosystem from the invoice standpoint or from the collection standpoint. Let's now look at how, as a CFO or as a finance organization, I can understand what is happening within my ecosystem from an AI standpoint, and how can we manage the cost of the different AI agents that might be created by all of the different teams. And so for this, we created what we call the AI control tower. In here, I can register an agent that is built in Unify apps, but that can also be coming from any other platform where your team is building agents today. Once it is registered, I can see a list of all of these agents, which one is active or not, and then try to understand what is the context of that specific agent. So what it is doing, which task it has, it's supposed to do, which tools it has access with knowledge, and which team is actually working on it. So if I have a question, I actually know who to ask. Looking at the compliance side of things, but most importantly for the finance team, looking at the FinOps of these agents, right? So trying to understand how much does this agent cost my organization? How much per session in total? Is there some trends in terms of like some at the beginning of the month? Is it every day, every week? Which team is using that? Which model is costing you the most? So that can be a way for you to understand how do you optimize your costs from an LLM standpoint, and can also define some thresholds for each of the agents. So making sure that after a certain amount that is being spent, let's say, I don't know, 100 or $1,000 for the specific agents per day, we want to make sure that this is stopped so that we avoid having some anomaly billing coming from the LLM provider. Obviously, you don't want to look only at the cost, right? You want to understand what is the usage of this agent so that you don't cut an agent that's actually being used, and you make sure that you're also looking at performance, right? So how is the agent performing, depending on which model is being used, depending on the teams and stuff like this. And so you can basically define, okay, maybe we should use the second most expensive model, not the first one, but we don't want to go to the third one because the performance is dropping a lot there. So it gives you some visibility into what's happening to your AI agents and where you can optimize your costs on that side of the house, and also understanding where in the organization is this cost being spent. All right, so with these 3 use cases, we saw an example of multiple agents working together to analyze some documents and make some recommendation. We saw how you can integrate to multiple different tools to have a single pane of glass to work on account receivables and have agents take autonomous actions. And we saw how we can also have an overview of all of your AI activities within the organization from a FinOps standpoint. And so with that, it's the end of our webinar. Thank you, and hopefully you got some more insight into how can AI help your finance organization.